Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And here we are in September 2022, and I have another special guest. Her name is Amy Messersmith. She is the Chief People Officer at Builders FirstSource. She's also recently a finalist for the DallasHR Executive of the Year. And Amy, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
Bruce, good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great today and very excited to get to spend some time with you.
Well, I'm so excited that you're here. I know that the last time I saw you in person was at the Dallas HR Stars Gala. And I was like, I have got to have you on the show. You were a finalist. Do you remember the gala? And what'd you think about that?
That was my first time. I was blown away. What an amazing event and what an impressive group of leaders. I got to meet some of those folks for the first time.
Mm.
In the Dallas HR world is so small. So that was a little bit of a surprise in and of itself to get to meet new people in our community. But wow, what a special evening. And I was very humbled, very blown away to be included in such an esteemed group. It was a fun night.
Yeah, I remember when we started the HR Executive of the Year recognition, it was back in 2012, and it was during our luncheon. We gave away one award. It was absolutely special. Julie Hoagland was the recipient of that. Do you know Julie?
Oh, very well. She's a
Yeah.
dear friend.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And so, and we've just built on that. And here we are, 10 years later, and it's turned out to be this evening gala. Everybody gets dressed up. And like you just mentioned, the networking is, it's incredible, isn't it?
It really was a special night. Very fun. I was, again, just very honored to be included.
Hey, well, we're going to talk, man. We're going to talk employee experience. Of course, you are now with Builders FirstSource, and I would love to hear kind of what that's been like. And we're going to talk all leadership. But before we do that, I would love for you to share just a brief highlight of Builders FirstSource and how do you serve your customers?
Thank you for letting me take time to talk about Builders FirstSource, because this is an organization I am so proud of and a collection of team members that I am just in great admiration of. So we are the nation's largest supplier of materials to the residential home building space. Although, as you can imagine, with building being as active as it has been in our country for the last many years, we do tend to venture a little bit past residential from time to time, but multifamily homes, single family. And, our mission is to bring the American dream of home ownership and make it more accessible to everyone. And that's not just, the average home builder customer out there. That's also our team members. We have 30,000 wonderful frontline workers who are working in our mill plants, in our truss and panel plants, in our lumber yards, who are supporting that home builder and delivering that product for that customer. And when you go out on our yards and you see these big roof trusses and walls, and they're being bound and bundled, that's not a stack of wood and components. That's going to be a framed home tomorrow. And that's where life is going to happen and memories are going to be made. And so we really hold that mission and that vision very, very close to our hearts. And so I'm very proud to be part of this organization. And it's been about 4 months now.
Man, I got to tell you, when someone says they bring up mission, when they're talking about the organization, I like get chills because I just think that's so special. And as you talk about that, you talk about, hey, this is all about the American dream of home ownership. And it reminds me of the story. I think we've all probably heard the story about, the 3 different workers, and one was asked, what is he doing? He said, I'm laying bricks. And the final one said, hey, I'm building the world's largest, home or cathedral. And that, as you share that, I'm sitting there thinking, like, that is what that's all about, being a really mission driven. And I love that. So I know there's special things ahead for this great company. Well, before we get into, the employee experience, before we get into some of the things you're passionate about and you're doing at your organization, I would love to hear the Amy Messersmith story. Like, where did you grow up? And how in the world did you get into leadership in HR?
Oh, what a good question. And it's, it would be so wonderful if I could tell you how intentional the journey was and just how thoughtfully crafted it was from the first, but it really was a series of blessings and good fortunes and other individuals who helped me along the way, which I think is kind of always how we get where we're going. But I was born and raised in East Texas in a little town called Palestine. It's about 45 miles outside of Tyler. So if you want something to eat or you need to buy something, you got to get in the car, drive to Tyler. So yeah, I was raised out there. I was a, PK, and grew up in a small town and just, had an absolutely great and wonderful childhood. I was one of the few in my family that went to a non-seminary type of education after high school. So I went to Texas A&M,
Mhm.
and went there like, a lot of kids in my demographic would have. I went there with some loans and some grants and a few scholarships and a couple of jobs. And so when I got out, I had a great business degree, but I also had some debt and a car that wasn't running the way it needed to. So I had been fortunate enough to be invited into an academic and leadership program there my junior and senior year called the College of Business Administration Fellowship Program. We had been the 13th class kind of rotation in that program. And that really opened up some doors for me. It was an avenue to be able to access employers and other opportunities that were just really bountiful. So when I graduated, I had a few different opportunities that I could choose from. And so, as it goes, they were all very different. None of them were HR. I wasn't really thinking that specifically. The one I chose, Bruce, is the one that paid the most because I thought I can start to chip away at my school debt and I can get my car fixed and I can afford to get my apartment and not have a roommate. And so, this is how I made the decision. So I ended up going to work for Anderson Consulting, which eventually became Accenture. So people will be familiar with the Accenture brand. And so I did that for a couple of years based out of Houston, and they give you a bundle of assessments to figure out what kind of person you are. Well, I wasn't a technology person. I could have told them that. Process is okay, but hey, it's not anything to write home about. So they said, you know what you are? You're a people person. We're going to put you in our human capital practice. And so really unbeknownst to me, I began working as low man on the totem pole in project settings, learning how to do what is effectively organizational development, learning and development, training, competency modeling, organizational hierarchy work. And so I was learning a specialist skill set without really understanding that was what I was being exposed to. So after a couple of years of doing that with Accenture, you guys, some may remember PricewaterhouseCoopers and Lybrand merged, and that changed the big consulting firm landscape in a pretty significant way. So I went to work on that merger internally, left Accenture, went over to PwC and did that work for a couple of years and knew I didn't want to be a partner, knew the consulting track was not for me long-term. And had made the decision to get married and do some other things during that time. So I wanted to come off the road. So we ended up settling in Dallas, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to join the PepsiCo organization inside their Frito-Lay business, which is, based here in Plano, Texas. And so what a wonderful organization. And they had a very vibrant, high performing organizational development and learning function within the Frito HR team. And so for the first, 4 years or so with the Frito business, I did a lot of internal kind of HR specialist work in those spaces, particularly. It was about 4.5 years in, though, that we were going through a restructure, and a very, very dear leader who I hold very, very close to my heart came to me and said, "Hey, would you consider maybe stepping into an HR business partner role and taking some of that specialist skill set and see if you like the view from an HR business partner chair?" And I thought, you know what? I would love to do that. Yes, I would love a different view, but obviously wanted to stay with that organization. And, Bruce, I never looked back. That was sort of where it all came together for me. I love partnering with a business leader and really thinking about what's happening in that piece of the business and how do we unlock the potential of people, right? And the motivations of people to make a difference in moving that business forward or solving that problem. And so that's really what HR business partnering is. It's a whole lot of common sense and a whole lot of collaboration, but I really found it to be just a space that I love very, very much. So I've never looked back. I never really went back into the specialist spaces, but have always, considered those to be my hip pocket skills.
Well, what a blessing. I mean, for certainly for the folks to say, "Hey, we see you as being someone that would really align in the human capital space early on," right, Anderson? And then here you are having someone else say, "Hey, have you thought about an HRBP role?" And I always talk about, I wrote the book called Find Your Lane, and I always talk about when you find your lane, work is just different. It's your calling, it's your purpose. And here you are, you just mentioned you have not looked back because you found the lane that really fulfills you and drives your everyday. But let me ask you this. You mentioned that I always like to talk about mentors. I think it's so important for us to just kind of share maybe people that have made impact on our lives, maybe something they did. Share a couple of mentors that have helped you on your journey. And then also, do you help mentor others?
Oh, yes. Well, listen, when I think back on my career, I would absolutely not be where I am if it weren't for some very wonderful men and women who sort of reached back and took my hand and said, "Come on, Amy, you can do this." And, actually pulled me forward even when I wasn't reaching forward. And, I think about then the privilege it is to get to do that for others, and being in a position now where I can do that for others. It is nothing more than just my way of saying thank you. So there were some really meaningful people, Lisa Wong Doyle in the early days of Frito-Lay was very instrumental. I worked for a woman named Karen Kendall for many years at Frito-Lay. Karen was masterful at challenging you to think differently about things, kind of breaking you out of your rut, but never in a way that made you feel exposed or wrong. It was, she really created space for you to learn, right? And to try some things on for size. Kim Warmbier, a lot of people know Kim, but Kim was one of those, she just she just walked the talk and was such an excellent example. And Tracy Faber, who's now over at McKesson, and Tracy Skeens at Young Brands, Patrick McLaughlin, who's leading Frito-Lay at HR Now, all of these folks were just present and meaningful and always speaking into my journey or, encouraging me along the way. But they, I remember them as active, right? They were active in my journey. And so when I think about where I am now, and honestly, for a long time, I didn't think much about kind of the present. I think I have always been really driven, but Bruce, more in a striving kind of a way than a pursuing way. I think for much of my younger career, it always felt like I had something else to prove or some other gap to close or some gap to, jump. But now I feel, you do kind of get to that place where you think, man, gosh, I am in this job, and I've done this job now a couple different times over and kind of got the hang of it. And I think, I can take a deep breath and I can finally just be present where I am. And that was a turning point for me some few years back, because it allowed me then to sort of look around and go, okay, wow, like I will always have more I want to do, but I've done more than I ever set out or expected to do. That's how fortunate I have been. So why not spend more of my time and intentionality trying to help others do the same? I've got it. I can do that now. And that's really what motivates me is spending time investing in others, mentoring others, and watching their potential. For somebody did that for me. They did it for me before I saw it in myself. And so it's really my great privilege to be able to do that for others who I'm mentoring. And, the other thing I've always studied people. So I'll find individuals and I'll see something in the way they lead or the way they carry themselves that I admire. And while I don't want to emulate it in a way that's inauthentic to me, if I admire something in a person, I'll kind of reflect on how would I adopt a similar approach or mindset, but in my authentic way. And that's been a big part of my continuous improvement journey too, is just watching how certain people are doing certain things really well and thinking about how could I improve in that way and what can I learn by watching this person who is so masterful, for example, in showing empathy or relating to others, on all points of the spectrum, or communicating a vision clearly. So I've had a lot of people who've mentored me and they don't even know it, because there have been, aspects of how they showed up and led that was just so impressive to me. And I was, I studied it.
Oh my goodness, Amy, there is so much there that is so good. And by the way, if you're listening right now, I hope you have your pen out, you have your notebook out, you're taking notes. I've taken already a sheet of notes, and when I wrote down intentional, it really energized me. And I think that, as you share, one of the things that I talk about is that we all see people that have success, and we can't really go copy them, but we can take little parts of inspiration and apply that to our lives to help make us better. And so as you shared that, I was like, that's what I want to do with this show. We've had over 120 guests on the show, and each guest brings something unique and with incredible value to the show. And me personally, I pulled so much out, and I've become a better leader just from being around. But you mentioned a couple of things I want to share. Number one, by the way, I love how you shared how each mentor really some insight to what was special. And when you said the word challenge, I think people when we are challenged and we're open to being challenged, we just become better. And I just love the word presence, walk the talk. I mean, so good. But the thing you mentioned, I want to dive in this just for a second here, because I think this is so important. And you said early on you were striving, and then today you are in pursuit.
At least for me
Yeah.
in my early career, look, I come from pretty humble beginnings. I don't have an advanced degree, right? So I have always felt, well, I was never at risk of being the smartest person in the room. I was never at risk of that happening to me, right? And so
Yeah.
there was always, not a chip. It wasn't a chip, but sort of just a recognition that I've gotten into some rooms that I'm not sure I belonged in,
Right.
right? And so that sense of always kind of needing to stand a little taller and prove a little something, and so it was more, I think it was more out of not a mindset of lack, but probably lesser self confidence,
Mm,
right? Than really kind of understanding, hey, like, don't play not to lose,
mm,
play to win. And I think that's what happened for me when I left PepsiCo. And what a great company. Gosh, I just can't say enough good things about it. And it took a big shiny role to lure me away, but the opportunity to move into and be bench for the chief people officer at Pizza Hut for the US was shiny. And
mm,
that was that kind of opportunity. But Bruce, I got to go through a program as part of the leadership development and executive development there at Yum called Heart Styles. And Heart Styles really got at a couple of important things. But when we're not our most effective, we're usually being drugged down by some feelings that are either rooted in a little bit of fear,
mm,
or we've let our negative ego, our prideful, our non-productive prideful self kind of creep up and get in our own head. And so when you're feeling like your ego's been pierced, or you're feeling a little fearful or marginalized, well, you probably are not showing up as your best. And so that program was all about helping you as a leader identify when that was
mm,
happening for you, and then
mm,
go ahead and get yourself back up, right? Get
mm,
yourself back up above the line. And I think it was in going through that program that I realized, wow, Amy, like, you don't always play to win. Now,
mm,
you've been fortunate and you have won a lot, but a lot of times you just play to hold your ground and not lose. But what if you just threw your arms up and said, I'm going to enjoy this
mm,
view, and I'm going to play to win, and I'm going to play for the joy of achievement and not that nagging feeling that perhaps if I put my neck out there, I might lose or I might stumble. And that, it's probably too just attributed to, at some point we all have to grow up, right? And I think I think in my ripe old 30s, I decided, well, maybe I'll just get comfortable in my skin here
Yeah.
and just enjoy the blessings, and lean in and give it my best, and know that if it works, great, and if it doesn't, I'll be okay.
I
And
love
that
that.
was very freeing. That was really freeing. But that was kind of one of those pivotal moments where it just felt more liberating. And so I guess that's really the root of what I'm describing.
I love that. I think there's probably a lot of people that can relate to that. I remember I've been at Armstrong Relocation now for 18 years. In the job before Armstrong, I had a boss that told me, "Hey, Bruce, you're playing not to lose." And I had no idea what he's talking about until later. And I was like, you know what? He was right. At first, it kind of made me, a little frustrated. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm working 18 hours a day here, but he was right on track. And so I'm better because of that. Hey, well, let's talk leadership. Here we are, 2022. Oh my goodness. One of the things that I do like to ask my guests, because there's so many different definitions. So if someone said, hey, Amy, what is leadership to you? How would you respond to that?
Well, for me, it's three things. And there's a lot underneath it, but I think today, first of all, this is a day and time when what's being asked of us as leaders is unprecedented.
Hmm.
There has literally been no manual, right, for a good solid 3 years at this
Yeah.
point, right?
Right. Yes.
Completely unprecedented.
Yeah.
And so as a leader, I think we have to show up with three things. We have to show up knowing our stuff. We need to be smart in our area of competency.
Mm-hmm.
That's first, because people want to follow competent people, right?
Right.
Right. The second thing is we need to have heart.
Mm.
We need to be willing to lead with heart. And this is our ability to empathize, to meet people where they are, to help connect with them on not just an intelligence level, but a heart level, a character level. And then the third, I think, is we have to be courageous, and probably more courageous than any other generation of leaders have been called upon to be for quite some time. And for me, this is all about our mindset. Do we have a
Mm-hmm.
growth mindset?
Mm.
Are we willing to be humble and to be open-minded and to continuously improve ourselves and to create space for others around us to do that? So there's a lot of intentionality in, making sure that every day we're trying to bring those three components forward. But I know as a follower,
Mm.
right, I want to be led in those ways and by leaders who bring all three. I really don't want to follow a leader that doesn't bring all three of those to the table. And so as a leader, knowing that others are following me, I feel like that's my obligation to them.
Yeah, that is so good. First of all, know your stuff. I love that. I was talking with Tiffany Haynes on the show recently, and she talked about competency and character. And we were talking about building. We were actually talking about building influence in the workplace, and she was talking about, when you talk about trust, there's difference between character and competency, and as you said that, I was like, yeah, people, we got to know our stuff. I mean, that's the first step to building trust. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and then of course you said heart and being courageous. I just love that. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, I just got back from SHRM conference, national conference. It was in New Orleans this year. It was so great seeing. It was great for me because I got a sense of hope, because there were 15,000 people there. Like, hey, we're back. People are wanting to go back and learn and grow and network and all of that stuff. But I was in a session, and one of the sessions was talked about the top. It was like the top, I think it's the top 10, but I really kind of plugged in the top three. But the top 10 things CEOs are thinking about, and number one was developing talent in the workplace. And you've talked about the importance of developing talent. The second thing was the importance of, or CEOs are thinking about the economy. And the third thing was hiring and retaining talent. Right, those top three. I was just curious, like for in your organization, have you heard those? And then I would love for you to talk a little bit about the importance of developing talent. I mean, here you are, you just mentioned you're 4 months in. I always think about a president coming into an organization. He's got this 100-day plan. I guess my question for you is, those three things that I just mentioned, developing talent, of course, the economy, and then hiring, retaining talent. Do those sound like those line up in your organization as well, or would you add something?
Well, no, those are absolutely at the top of my mind. I know at the top of our CEO's mind. And it's, the developing talent is a business sustainability
Hmm.
matter. It's not that it's a nice thing to do. It is.
Mhm.
But if you don't develop the next generation of talent to step in and lead, well, then your business is going to falter, or at least you're going to struggle some. And so, as you know, as I've come into this new role, I certainly have had 100-day plan. And in fact, last week just got to present to our board of directors that plan and what the strategy is going to look like going forward. So that was really fun and exciting and affirming. But as I look at our demographics, Bruce, we have a significant portion of our leaders who are of a certain age or
Mhm.
higher.
Mhm.
And I say, hey, I'm in that age too. So, yay for all of us, but wow, who's behind us,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And what's the game plan like now, right? To get these folks ready. Because what you don't want to do is to find out if they can do it after you've put them in the job. You want to know that when you're
Mm.
putting them in the role, and you're intentionally getting them ready to go into the role, that they're going to be set up for success and be able to deliver. And look, as a shareholder, I'm very invested in that, right? That's a fiduciary responsibility to everyone who's invested in our business. So developing talent is a big one. Now, here's what's going to be interesting over the coming months. Whatever goes on with the economy, right, meets still super hard to find and retain people. This
Mm.
is a really strange dynamic that we've not seen these two forces quite so juxtaposed in a long time that I can recall. So it'll be interesting to see how these three priorities kind of reorder themselves. But I would
Mhm.
say for sure those are three of the big ones.
Yeah, yeah, no question, no question. Well, one of the things that I in some of the research I've done on you, that's one of the things I really enjoy about hosting a podcast is it really makes you be purposeful in going out and reading someone's profile. Anyway, one of the things I read about you is you want to be the employer of choice.
Yes.
And I just employer of choice culture. And I just thought, man, that's fantastic. I want to talk, and I would love to spend the last part of this section on talking about the employee experience, because it seems like everywhere I go, everybody wants to talk about the attendee experience, the customer experience, the employee experience, like that's all wrapped up into one. But I think everything is driven by that employee experience. The more I talk to people about it, the more it kind of intertwines into just from start to finish, culture. I mean, everything about it. We just talked a little bit about developing talent. Can you share your thoughts around the employee experience? And is that talked about in the boardroom? And what are your thoughts around the employee experience?
Well, we had this great saying in the restaurant business: the customer's experience will never exceed the team member's experience.
Mm.
And I read a book while I was in the role at Pizza Hut called Widgets. And what led me to that book is we were working with an outside firm on our employee value proposition, and what was authentically true for us, and how would we then demonstrate that authentically true story through proof points and the right programs and investments. So I read this book called Widgets, and it's towards the front. It's an easy read, and one I recommend. But it basically says, listen, here's the thing, guys. As human beings, we're real simple. We're just reciprocating. You're kind to me, chances are I'm going to be kind to you. You smile at me, I'm probably going to smile back. You give me the stink eye, I might look at you a little odd, right? So like, we are reciprocating beings. So when you think about that from a team member perspective and a business perspective, how could a team member ever give to a customer what has not been given to them to pass on?
Mm.
So, as how we treat that team member is or is not going to fill their cup. And that cup is or is not going to be then there for them to draw upon to deliver a good customer experience.
Mm.
So if you've ever gone into a place and thought, I really think they wish I would go away, right? I really think that they don't like having any customers in here. You're probably right. And it's
Mm.
probably because that team member has a very similar experience with
Mm.
that employer. So the environment that we create for our team members is what the customer is going to feel. And so we have ultimate control over that. We have a lot of control over how we decide to treat our people, knowing that that's how they're going to treat the customer.
Man, that is so good. I will put that book in the show notes widgets so people can check that out. Well, let me ask you this kind of the follow-up question. I guess I want to ask you to that is when you came into the organization, the company has a culture. It's not like we don't have a culture. Now you come in and you're going to design one. It has
Right.
one. So how did you approach that? Do you approach that as, hey, what's the culture like? And then you shape that, or what's your kind of views around? And that's really for people that are listening. Like they're like, hey, I just started a new company. Yeah. How did you approach how you would, uh, I'll use the word shape or approach your culture and your organization.
Well, I would look at it probably from two different angles, depending on whether I'm coming in as the chief people officer or CHRO, or if I'm just joining an organization and trying to
Okay.
get a lead on, okay, who have I joined up with here? Listen, as just observers in any business, you can look around and see the artifacts of the culture. Or do the posters on the wall even remotely resemble the way people actually behave to one another, right?
Mm, mm,
Do the behaviors and the outcomes that are being produced line up at all with the mission statement that's being espoused? So it's not hard, right, to
mm,
kind of very quickly figure out, are we congruent, right?
mm.
Or is what we say and do congruent? And hopefully the answer is yes, it is. And I'm not surprised. And I knew what I was signing up for. As a chief people officer, though, it's not uncommon to come in and clearly be able to observe, right,
Mm.
the sort of the cultural norms, how people think, feel, and act around here, right? That's not hard to observe. What is sometimes harder, though, is to wrap it in a narrative that's useful and compelling in order to galvanize and be more intentional about using the good of that culture
Mm.
to move the business forward. So what we've done in the last 120 days is a series of focus groups
Mm.
where we got out and talked to our frontline employees. And I don't want to know everything. I just want to know, hey, when you think about working here, what makes this place really special for you?
Mm.
Why here and not somewhere else? You know, lots
Mm.
of choices out there, more jobs than anybody can possibly fill these days with talent. So why here? And it's amazing. You don't ever have to go in a boardroom and shut the door and talk to yourself on this. In fact, I would strongly recommend not doing that.
Mm.
Talk to your people. They know
Mm.
the answers. They will tell you the answers.
As you talk about that, I'm sitting there thinking, if I'm I don't know, if I'm a manager, a supervisor, a director, there's some things that I can do in the organization. I don't have to be the chief people officer to do these things, do I? I can walk around and I can ask these questions, right?
That's right. That's right. And so some of the emerging themes, we've just finished our, what I call my research stage, right, of this work, which is gathering those inputs. We've done, more than 100 focus groups over the last 120 days. We did it at all levels of the organization, but we're predominantly a frontline workforce. So that's where I needed to spend the most of my
Hmm.
time, because that is where the truth is or is not, right? Going to be present in that team member experience. So we've heard some things that are man, it's got a lot of legs. I mean,
Mm,
the next step is to wrap some copy around it and to put some creative to it. Start to think about how it translates to employment marketing and internal employee program design and things like that. But when you start hearing this is a place where you can really grow your career and have opportunities with or without a college degree,
mhm,
you start to realize, okay, well, there is some secret sauce in this, and
mm.
we can cook with this.
I love that focus groups. So there's a tip for all the listeners, people that are watching today. Go out and talk to your people. Get some focus groups. I used that word earlier. A challenge. You challenge them, but be open to being challenged too. Maybe there's some things that we need to change up just a little bit. And so this has been so good. Oh my goodness! I told you the time was going to just fly by.
Been
Uh, I,
fun.
I want to ask you for those listening. And you didn't, I mean, you shared your story. You didn't start at the chief people officer in these C-level roles. You've grown and you've built an incredible career. For those listening that maybe they want to be a top level leader. Any tips you would share that maybe has helped you along the way?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. One, say yes, raise your hand.
Mm,
Sometimes that does mean that you're taking on some added work. Sometimes it means
mm,
you're going to take a lateral move instead of a promotion, because you know that critical experience is an important one to get. But I would say yes, like be up for it,
mm,
and lean in, and don't be afraid to try some different things. One thing I never did was actually veer out of HR and do an operational role or a P&L role. I never did that. And I may do that at some point. That could be a really interesting opportunity, but I would say yes.
mm,
The other piece of advice I would give, and this I would give to my younger self, is just be kind to you.
mm,
Be kind to you. And in the same way that I know we work hard to show grace to others, show grace to yourself and
mm.
focus on your strengths. Now, I think it's important to always be aware and open to the fact that we all have opportunities for improvement. And we should try to minimize the negative impacts that has on others. But I think focusing on our strengths keeps our
Mm.
head in the right place and keeps us positive and keeps us moving forward. So those are some things that, look, advice that I got along the way that I'm
Mhm.
happy to share in return, because it's been helpful to me.
That is so good. I guarantee there are people out there listening right now that are writing this down. And I love that. Be kind to you, especially over the last 3 years. You just talked about we're in unprecedented times. Do your best, forget the rest, work hard, be kind to people, be kind to yourself, most importantly. Like just give yourself that grace. I love that. This has been so much fun. Hey, I want to shift over to the last part of the show as we kind of wrap up here. I call it, it's time to accelerate. And one of the things I always like to ask my guests, high performers, do you like to read a book or listen to a podcast, or maybe listen to an audible book?
Oh, I'm audible. I've got to commute downtown 4 or 5 days a week, and I'm usually listening to 3 or 4 different books at any time on Audible. And I'd love to tell you I'm reading some sort of really academic or business focused. I'm reading whatever I want to. I love story. I just love story.
I absolutely love that. Suzanne Myers has been a guest on my show. She's CHRO, and she recommended a couple of fiction books. And I'm typically I'm reading these business books, and I got into these books, and I just, man, it was awesome. I just loved it. It was like it took me away
It's
just
a
for a little
respite.
bit. It just took me away. I love that. Hey, this is fantastic. Let me ask you this. You work a lot. I know high performers work a lot, but outside of work, I'm just curious, like what energizes you?
Well, I'm an introvert by nature, so I have to kind of get away and have a little bit of quiet time. That's where I think too, sometimes the time with Audible in the car
Mm-hmm.
is good. But spending time with my family and
Mm,
my, that close circle of friends, that's always very,
mm,
very energizing. And I would say too, seeing my team continue to elevate and achieve, that is very energizing to me.
mm.
Seeing others make it happen is fun.
Well, I've had one of your team members on the show, Yvonne Freeman, absolutely fantastic leader. I see the team from afar, how you're building really, really something special there. And so I appreciate that. I know your team listening is going to appreciate you sharing that. Hey, well, let me ask you the final question, Amy, and it's probably one of my favorite questions. Amy, 10 years older, is around the corner knocking at your door, and you're going to get up and go answer that door. What's she going to tell you?
Oh, I hope what she's going to tell me is enjoy this ride, enjoy
Mm,
the view, just be present, and I just think be present. Just
mm,
be intentional and be present, because there's so much to see and enjoy and take in. And I think when we can be present and intentional, we're able to see those opportunities
mm.
in a way that we don't when we're in our head and always thinking about the next move.
I would say that's a very wise 10-year-older Amy Messersmith. That is absolutely fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that. And that's really, as you talk about that, yeah, for me, when I feel present, I feel joy. Like you said, you just feel that joy and that fulfillment in life, right? Because you're there. And so listen, I appreciate you coming onto the show, sharing your wisdom, your perspective. It's been so good. Hey, if somebody heard you on the podcast and said, I'd like to learn more about Amy, or maybe follow her, or is there a way that they could connect with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I
Oh,
need to do a better job with social media in general, but I'm definitely on LinkedIn and would love to connect and hear from folks and build a relationship.
yeah. So if you want to connect with Amy, just go out to LinkedIn and be sure and put a note in. It really helps on the connection. I know a lot of times people will go out there and just connect, and like, we don't know who you are or why you want to connect. But when you put that note that, hey, I heard Amy on the show and she talked about this, that always helps that connection. So again, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. And hey, and again, congratulations on being a finalist at the HR Stars. You are definitely driving in the leadership lane, and I appreciate you. And I can't wait to share this episode.
Thank you, Bruce. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.